Hello, my name is Steve Bowler, and welcome to the Introduction to JWeb video. In this lab, what I'm going to do is show you how to manage and maintain your Juniper device via the JWeb. So what we're going to do in this lab is we're going to show you the basics of JWeb, how to do some basic system administration via the JWeb interface. We're going to make sure that we have connectivity to our device first, then we're going to get into it and set up the device. In this case, we're using an SRX210 that's in my home lab. We're going to use this device. We're going to have to configure it via the CLI first, the command line interface. We're going to have to get into it and put in a command so that we can get into the device via the JWeb interface. Once we're in, we're going to explore some of the key features of the JWeb. And let me first explain our network topology. We have the SRX210H, and in this network topology we have the SRX210H configured to, are connected to the Cisco router via GNS3. So the connection goes from the SRX210 into my network interface card on my laptop, and then from my laptop I'm running GNS3 and bridging the connection from the real Juniper router into GNS3 and to a Cisco router. So what I'm going to show you is how to set up and do some basic configuration via the JWeb and how you can monitor and maintain this information. So that's why I have the Cisco router in this lab, so I can show you some information and some of the key features. So let's go ahead and get started. One of the first things we want to do is make sure that we can reach our device. So we're going to bring up the command prompt. We're going to try to ping this device. Let me go ahead and put in here, I forgot to put in our subnet. We're on the 192.168.1.0/24 subnet. The Juniper router is, our Juniper device is the .1. Our Cisco device, we're going to make the .2. We're going to get in and configure that in a moment. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to make sure that we have reachability from our local workstation to the Juniper router. So 192.168.1.1, you can see that we have reachability. And what the JWeb is and allows us to do is, if you're familiar with Cisco, the Security Device Manager, the JWeb gives us a similar experience. So with the Security Device Manager, what it allows us to do is manage and maintain and access our Cisco device via the Internet Explorer or Firefox or any type of web browser. So it's like a GUI, a graphical user interface, that allows us to put in configuration commands in a easier way. So if you're not familiar with the command line interface on the Juniper devices, you can access the JWeb, and it simplifies, for the most part, it simplifies your router administration. So now that we have reachability, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just bring up Firefox, and what we're going to do to get into the device is we're going to just put in the IP address. And I'm going to show you to see if we have reachability. Right now we do not. It says that we're unable to connect, and this brings up one of the first things we have to do to get into and administer this Juniper device via the JWeb. We have to go under the router. We have to access it via the command line. Right now I'm SSH'd into the router via PuTTY. We have to go into configuration mode, and the first thing we have to do is the command under the services hierarchy. So we'll go under Edit System Services, and then we're going to do the command set. We do a space question mark, you see that we have an option for web management. So we have to enable web management before we can get into the device via our web browser. So we do the command set web management space question mark, and we're going to use, just for this case, we're going to use unencrypted HTTP connection settings. So we're going to do set web management HTTP and hit enter. We'll go ahead and commit this change. And once that gets done, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and try to reload. And now you can see that we are presented with the Juniper Web Device Manager, otherwise known as JWeb. So we're going to access this with the username and password of a valid user account that is configured on the router. So if you don't know the root user account, what you want to do is you want to get from your system administrator or network administrator or network engineer, you want to get a valid user account to be able to access the JWeb. What we're going to do is we're going to just go in under the root user account. So we just enter the username and password. Let's go ahead and try again. Root and password. And you can see that when we have logged in correctly, you can see that the JWeb begins to load. So this is a very cool feature, a very cool program that we have. It gives us the ability to take a look at our Juniper device, what it actually physically looks like, and the status. We see that we have a connection. If we zoom in, excuse me, sorry about that. We zoom in, we have a connection. The green connection is the gig 000, and we can actually just click on that and it'll bring up the configuration. If I right click, you can see that we have options: configure the port, monitor the port. This is the connection that we are accessing our Juniper device through, so we don't want to mess with that connection right now. We can see that we have some of the default options on the right. We have the CPU utilization, the memory utilization, the storage, and at the top we have multiple tabs. We have the dashboard, which is what we are in presently. We can go in and click on the configure tab, and what that's going to do is bring up on the left hand side all of the options that we can use to configure the SRX device. It gives us by default the interfaces that it brings up, and it has all the connection. It has the interface name, the link state configured, and the description. So one of the first things I want to show you under the configure tab is if we click on the CLI tools, by default it's going to bring up the CLI viewer because that's the first option, and what this gives us is the current configuration running on the device, which is pretty cool. You can go and click on the CLI editor, and what this is going to allow us to do is this allows us to go into the configuration and make changes if we want. Say I want to change an IP address or any other option on the fly. I could put in a 2 or whatever I want, and then at the bottom, if I scroll down, I can just hit the commit button, and then those options will be saved to the configuration. So we'll get back into the configuration tab in a minute. What I want to show you now is the monitor tab. If I click on the monitor tab, just want to show you what it brings up by default. Brings up the ports that you can monitor. By default, again, we're under the interfaces that we can monitor first. We can go into routing, services, security. There's a lot of options that we can monitor. And I'm going to go over this in more detail in a minute. But what I first want to show you is, actually, let's go ahead and do the monitor part of the lab now that we're in it. We're going to monitor the interface GigE000. Again, if we go back to our network topology, GigE000, let me go ahead and put this in. This interface is over and connected to our Cisco device. We're going to make that connected to Fast Ethernet 00. So let's go ahead and boot up the Cisco router so that we can get into it and put a basic configuration on it. While we're waiting for that to come up, let's go back to JWeb, and I'm going to show you under the Maintain tab. On the left-hand side, we have a couple options. We have configuration or config management. We have software, and this is where we can upload Junos to the local device. We can also, you can see it's going to ask us or show us where, if we click browse, it's going to ask us for a file to upload, and we can browse to the correct location. We can also install, once we upload it, install the Junos. Also, we have an option to downgrade. There's an option to reboot, and we also have a license tab. Let's go back. Again, that is under the Maintain tab, and under the Maintain tab, under the software area on the left-hand side. That's where we can manage our Junos upgrades and downgrades. Let's go back to our Cisco device now that it's loaded. Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's look at the Fast Ethernet 00. Looks like it already has an IP address. That's good. Now what I'm going to do on this Cisco device, I'm going to go ahead and try to ping the Juniper side, and you can see that we have reachability. Let's go back to our JWeb, and we'll go to monitor, and I just want to show you a couple of things under the interface GigE000. So if we go and let's do a ping with a repeat count of, we'll set it high to like 100,000, and we'll set the size of the ping to, well, let's just leave the size alone. Go ahead and hit enter. On the top right side under the monitor tab, you see that we have a refresh interval. Let's go ahead and change this. We'll change this, instead of every 30 seconds, we'll change it to 10 seconds. And what we should see is that our interface statistics for GigE000 should change pretty quickly here. as we can see, the input rate is going up along with the output rate. We can slowly see this incrementing the amount of traffic going across the interface. If I go to Show Graph and click on it, see the ping is still going on the Cisco device. Let's go ahead and go to Details. And when we click on the Details tab, this is going to bring us up all the information on the interface that we are currently taking a look at, and that's GigE000. If we click on the Traffic tab, we can see that we're getting bits per second, we're getting the total number of packets, so if I go back, and this is real time, so if I go back to my Cisco device and go ahead and cancel the ping, what we should start to see is that the interface statistics, the input and output rate, go back down. And we can see now that the traffic, the bits per second, has dropped as well. So pretty cool stuff. Allows us to The Monitor tab allows us to monitor interfaces in real time. Also, there's a lot of other options. Routing, one of the main ones. What I want to show you too is we can clear the statistics on the interface. If I click on this button, it's going to ask me to confirm if I want to clear the statistics on GigE000. I'm going to go ahead and hit yes, and now if I go to Details, and click on the Traffic tab, now you can see that the information has been reset, or the statistics have been reset. So this is good. Some good stuff to know. Also, one of the things when looking at this, when you're monitoring an interface, you can take a look at the error counters, the input and output. Right now we have 0, which is good. But when one of these, we can see if we hover over these different colors, the different colors represent different types of errors. So we have input drops, framing errors, layer 3 incompletes. Pretty cool stuff. So now let's go ahead and take a look at one of the things on the Cisco device. If I do a show IP OSPF neighbor, we can see that we have a connection with the Juniper router. Let's go ahead and do this on the Juniper side. If I go under the Configure tab and under Routing, what I'm going to do is go under OSPF, and actually let me do this real fast. what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the command line on the Juniper device, and I'm going to delete my OSPF configuration. So we'll just do delete delete protocols OSPF. We'll commit this, and what I should see is on the Cisco device, you should see the neighbor adjacency drop. After the dead time, obviously the dead timer has to expire. And now if I go under the routing, under OSPF tab, we should see that right now we do not have OSPF enabled, and we can set the router ID. So if we want to, we can rename this. We'll rename this to just 1.1.1.1, and we'll hit apply. Actually, on the Cisco router, we can see now that our OSPF neighbor adjacency has gone down. So now if I do a show IP OSPF neighbor, I have no OSPF neighbor with the Juniper router. So what we're going to do is we're going to configure OSPF via the JWeb. We're going to give ourselves a router identifier of 1.1.1.1. We're going to click on the box to enable OSPF, and the area ID 0.0.0.0 represents area 0. We have a box where we can select the area type. We're just going to leave it as a regular area. And then there's another box to enable OSPF on all interfaces. So let's go ahead and click on that. So what that's going to do is put all of the OSPF disabled interfaces and make all of them enabled. So pretty easy to configure OSPF. Now we hit apply, and if again, one of the main reasons why you would use the JWeb is if you're not familiar with the command line interface, the JWeb allows you to very quickly enable routing protocols and other options within your router. So now if I go back to the Cisco router, we can see that we have a message saying, we have an adjacency change saying that we have a neighbor of 1.1.1.1. So now if I do a show IP OSPF neighbor, we can see that the router ID has changed. Before we had the neighbor on the 111 with the 111 router ID, now we have it as 1.1.1.1. And we can see, if I do a show IP route on the Cisco router, we can see that we are learning via OSPF the 11 network. And if I go under the monitor tab, we can go under monitor routing, and we can see that we have the routing table listed. We have INET 0, again this is IPv4, the IPv4 routing table. We have the 11 network, that is our directly connected network via, if we take a look at the plus, let's see, the interface for the 11 network, this should be loopback 0. If we go under monitor interfaces, we can tell exactly where the 11 network is configured. If we go to the port and just scroll down once it loads, we can show you that Actually, it's not under monitor, I'm sorry. If we go to configure and then go under, took me a minute when I first tried to find that, took me a minute. There might be a section where you can find the loopback 0 interface under monitor, but I haven't figured it out yet. So if you know how to do that, send me an email and let me know, because I'm curious. The only place I've found it so far is under the configure tab. If I go to configure and then click on loopback 0.0, what this is going to do is give me the current IP address, and we can see the 11 network is loopback 0.0. So what I wanted to show you is that we advertised our loopback 0.0, loopback 0.0 interface on the Juniper side into OSPF, and we are learning it via OSPF on the Cisco router. So let's go back to the routing table. If we go under monitor, what we're going to do is go under routing. So we're going to go under monitor tab, then routing, and then to see OSPF information, what this is going to do is give us the OSPF neighbor, like we do show OSPF neighbor from the command line interface on the Juniper device. It gives us the OSPF neighbors, so this is showing the neighbor is the Cisco router. Gives us our router ID, the state, the interface, the area, the designated router and backup designated router on the network, how long the adjacency has been up. It also gives us the interfaces in which we are running OSPF on and advertising, and the OSPF statistics. So pretty detailed information you can get when we look at monitoring the OSPF information that we just configured. We go back to the route information. This gives us our routing table. You can see that we are learning the 2 network via OSPF. So if we go to the Cisco router and do a show IP interface brief, we can see that the loopback 0 on the Cisco router has the 2 network assigned to it. If I do a show run pipe to begin OSPF to look at the OSPF configuration on the Cisco router, we can see that we are advertising everything into OSPF. So that's why we have the loopback 0 network being advertised to the Juniper router. So if you have a lot of routes in your routing table, you can narrow down, you can use the search option to, if you put in, to find more specific, or to find one of the routes that you're looking for. I haven't mentioned the troubleshoot tab, so let's go ahead and take a look at that real quick. What we can do is, you can see when I hit the troubleshoot tab, we have multiple options on the left. We can ping a host, we can ping through MPLS, we can do trace route, packet capture. So pretty cool. We can also do a command line interface terminal. If we click on this, I haven't used this yet, so I'm not quite sure if this is going to work or not. So looks like there might be something else that I'm missing to do this. Let's go and just run a quick ping. What I want to show you is the ping host option. In this case, we'll ping the 2 network. We know the 2 network is on or associated with the Cisco router. So we'll go ahead and do a start. We'll click on the start tab of the start button. And we can see that we have reachability. By default, when we do a ping, via the J-Web, I think it's going to just ping 10 times. Let's go ahead and hit OK. And then I just want to show you one last thing. If we go to the advanced options and click on the plus sign, we see that we have multiple options. We can pick the size of the packet, the routing instance, the interface we want to source it from, the time to live, and you can see the count. So the default count is 10, and that's what we saw when we did the paying to the 2 network. We saw 10 packets. So that's a basic look at the J-Web. And again, this is a look at the J-Web through the SRX210H Juniper device. Let's go ahead and summarize what we looked at. We looked at how you set up J-Web and make your router accessible, or switch accessible, via J-Web. We had to go under the Set System Services Web Management and enable HTTP. Then we were able to get into, we put the IP address of our router into our web browser, and then we connected and logged in with a valid user account. Once we did that, the J-Web came up and loaded, and I showed you all the tabs and what you can do with all the tabs. We went through basic interface monitoring. We also looked at how to set up a routing protocol. In this case, we looked at OSPF and configured OSPF. We looked at where you would do your Junos upgrading and downgrading, and that's from the Maintain tab. Under the Software tab. We also, we looked at the Troubleshoot tab, and we did a simple ping and showed you how that works within the J-Web. So thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.